All right, let's dive into one of the most important stories ever told in comics. Seriously, this is a story that took a pretty standard monster character and just blew it wide open, asking some really deep, really uncomfortable questions about what it even means to be human. This is the anatomy lesson.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want you to just pause and think about this for a second. What if everything you thought made you, your memories, your history, the very core of who you are, was just wrong? That's the terrifying idea at the heart of what we're talking about today.
Okay, so to really get why this story hit so hard, you've got to understand where Swamp Thing started. The original concept was a pretty classic tragedy, you know? A good man trapped inside a monstrous body. So the setup is simple enough. You've got this scientist, Alec Holland, working on a secret formula. Boom, lab explosion. He gets drenched in the stuff, stumbles into the nearby swamp, and comes out as this muck-encrusted monster. But here's the key. He still thinks he's Alec Holland. He believes his mind, his soul, is just trapped in this plant-like shell. And his whole goal, his one driving hope, is to somehow become human again.
So at first, we're dealing with a classic case of body horror, right? The fear of your own body turning against you, becoming this alien prison. But where the anatomy lesson just completely flips the script is by shifting into something way more terrifying, existential horror. The fear isn't about the prison of your body anymore. It's the chilling idea that yourself, your very consciousness, is the real prison.
And that massive shift all starts right here. Swamp Thing gets shot up, captured, and is, for all intents and purposes, dead. His body, frozen solid, ends up on a cold steel dissection table. And this is where the grim investigation begins.
The guy brought in to do the dirty work is a scientist named Jason Woodrue. He's been hired by this ruthless corporate villain, Avery Sunderland, who only cares about one thing, cracking open this creature to find that biorestorative formula. But what starts out as a pretty straightforward autopsy is about to get really, really weird.
So Woodrue starts the dissection, and right away something is off. He's finding organs, a heart, lungs, a liver, but they're not made of animal tissue. They're made out of plant matter. They're just crude imitations, like props. They don't actually do anything.
Well, that just opens up a whole bigger can of worms. Woodrue's a brilliant botanist, and he realizes the original story makes no sense. A formula made for plants couldn't just rewrite human biology on a cellular level. It's impossible. The science is just plain wrong. But the real kicker, the part that changes everything, is the brain. He gets to the brain, the seat of Alec Holland's consciousness, and finds it's not a brain. It's just a dense fibrous mass of plant tissue. There's no way it could hold memories or generate human thought, which leads to the terrifying question. If that's not Alec Holland's brain, then who or what has been walking around thinking it's him?
After weeks of just banging his head against this biological puzzle, Woodrue finally understands. And the conclusion he comes to isn't just some clever plot twist. It's a revelation that completely demolishes the entire foundation of the character.
Here it is. Alec Holland never became the Swamp Thing. He never stumbled out of that swamp. The night of the lab explosion, Alec Holland died. Full stop.
So what is this creature? The horrifying truth is that the swamp plants, stimulated by the chemicals, absorbed Holland's dying consciousness. They basically digested his memories and his personality as his body sank into the muck. The creature isn't a man who looks like a plant. It's a plant that's doing a convincing impression of a man.
Woodrue's own notes just capture the profound tragedy of it. This being was never a man trying to get his old life back. It was a plant, trying its absolute best to live up to the ghost of a man it had consumed. So you can only imagine what happens when Swamp Thing wakes up and learns the truth. He reads Woodrue's report, and his entire world doesn't just fall apart. He's forced to realize it never even existed. This is a complete and total existential breakdown.
And the first thing he has to deal with on a philosophical level is this idea of bad faith. It's that moment you realize you've been living a lie, and worse, you're the one who's been telling it to yourself. He was a plant pretending to be a man, and he never even knew it. Just think about that. Every single moment he spent mourning his wife, dreaming of a cure, longing to be human again, it was all for nothing. He was pining for a life that was never his to begin with. It was a ghost story he was telling himself. And that leads right into the next crisis, a loss of facticity. Look, our sense of self is built on the foundation of our past, right? Our experiences. But if your memories aren't yours, if your past isn't real, then what are you?
You have no foundation. You're nothing.
His entire identity, everything he thought he was, wasn't built on reality. It was just an impression, an echo of a dead man's hopes and dreams. There's nothing real to hold on to.
The psychological shock is so absolute, so devastating, that it actually becomes physical. His mind shatters, and without that borrowed consciousness to hold it together, his body just collapses. It reverts back to what it truly is, an unthinking, inert pile of plant matter.
But here's the thing. When you hit absolute rock bottom, when you lose literally everything you thought you were, there's a strange kind of freedom in that. It's a chance to start over. For real this time.
His way out of the darkness comes from this really powerful idea: existence precedes essence. All that means is that you aren't born with a fixed identity or purpose. You exist first, and then, through your actions and choices, you create who you are. He was never really Alec Holland, which means he's finally free to be himself.
And this is where he starts to rebuild. He finally confronts the lie he was living. He lets go of the name Alec Holland. He accepts his true, unique nature as a consciousness of the green. And by defining his own existence, instead of imitating someone else's, he unlocks power and understanding he never could have imagined as a man.
I think this analogy just sums it up perfectly. He spent all that time trying to follow a dead man's map, trying to get back to a home that was never his. Now, he's finally thrown that map away and is free to explore the world and find out who he truly is on his own terms.
In the end, his final triumphant declaration isn't about getting back what he lost. It's about choosing what he will become. He's not a ghost anymore. He's a living thing, choosing to live, to grow, and to rise up. Which kind of brings us back to that first question, doesn't it? If you found out you weren't who you thought you were, who would you choose to become?